Before we get started, please go over to Amazon.com and grab a copy of my book, Education and Justice. If you have an African-American son in public school, you need this book because I teach you the many ways that public schools mistreat African-American boys and what you can do to help your son. So go over there and get your copy immediately. For the past few weeks, I have been on a journey. And when I say a past few weeks, actually, for years, I've been on a journey of trying to say emphatically that Black churches must relieve themselves of what I call white theology. And I have made multiple videos. I've preached multiple sermons about this in my ministry because it has had a very deleterious impact, not only on Black churches, but the Black community. And I've taken you in these videos and in my sermons, I've taken you to a certain point, but I have solicited the help of an expert in this area. Now, as a licensed attorney, one of the things that we do is when we need someone to explain something to the jury, and you are the jury, you're the audience, we don't try to explain someone else's expertise because we're not jacks of all trade, we're attorneys. What we do is we bring in experts. And I have one such expert today, Dr. Theron Williams, Reverend Dr. Theron Williams. And he's going to explain to us precisely what I've tried to convey over the years about how white theology, I think he calls it white evangelical theology, how it has impacted negatively the African-American church and by extension, the African-American community. All right. So I'm going to bring him in and we're so delighted to have him. So without further ado, thank you, Dr. Theron Williams of the Mount Carmel Baptist Church in Indianapolis, Indiana, for taking out of your very busy schedule to help explain to us exactly why white theology, white evangelical theology, has been so bad for the African-American church. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, attorney. I appreciate it. Thank you for sharing this platform with me and for allowing me to come on and to share with you. Thank you so much. I do appreciate the invitation.
Before we get started, sir, let me go to your website, BibleIsBlackHistory.com. So let's go there, and I want to share with the audience your bio. So again, Dr. Theron D. Williams. Let's scroll down to his biography here. This is his website to learn about his ministry and the work that he does in this space. Just go to BibleIsBlackHistory.com. All right, BibleIsBlackHistory.com. And right there on the front page, the Bible is Black History, his latest release. All right, so let me read some of his biography here. For more than 30 years, Dr. Theron D. Williams has been the pastor of Mount Carmel Church of Indianapolis, Indiana. Dr. Williams was born in Detroit, Michigan. What up, though? He is the fourth of 8 siblings. He attended the Detroit public school system and is a graduate of Murray Wright High School, after which enrolling in Highland Park Community College in Highland Park, Michigan. He is also an alumnus of Virginia Union University and its School of Theology, earning a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology and a Master of Divinity degree, respectively. Dr. Williams completed his doctoral studies at the Chicago Theological Seminary. There's so much more here that I could read, but you all please go to his website and read his bio and get his books. He has quite a few books that he has written. And so again, we're just delighted to have such a quality person here to talk about this. Let's start with some basics. Let's assume that our audience has not heard any of your sermons or read any of your books. Would you offer for us your definition of white evangelical theology?
Well, all theology is contextual. They emerge out of a historical, cultural context. No theology just floats around in the ether without context. Black theology, womanist theology, white theology, whatever theology we're talking about, emerge from a social context. White theology is no different. White theology emerged out of a social context during the European Age of Enlightenment back in the 16th, 17th, and 18th and 19th centuries, when Europeans were trying to work out a theology to justify white supremacy. They had been going around the world, dominating people of color, going into their lands, enslaving their people, taking their natural resources, and treating them just like they were inhuman. And yet they would go back to Europe and view themselves as pure and holy and close to God and the best thing God has ever created. And yet, on the other hand, they were going to North America, they were going to Africa, they were going to Australia, and they were dominating, pillaging, killing, raping, and just taking and stealing everything they could. And yet they saw themselves as these morally upright, justice-loving, wonderful people. So there was a cognitive dissonance that their self-perception was contradicted by their behavior. And the way to resolve a cognitive dissonance is, number one, stop doing what you're doing. If you call yourself holy and pure and close to God, peace and justice, you can't treat people of color the way you were treating them and still maintain your self-perception. So you either, number one, have to change your behavior. Stop treating people of color the way you're treating them. Well, they weren't going to do that because they were making too much money doing it and they were amassing too much power doing it. So you can forget that. They weren't going to stop doing that. Or the second thing is you can stop perceiving yourself as these wonderful, nice, holy people. They weren't going to stop doing that either. They were saying, we are holy, we are pure, we are next to God, we love justice, and we're going to continue to dominate these people. So what is the third option? It is to create a hierarchy of humanity. That is, this is where the whole idea of racism comes into play. So now you create a chain of being, placing whiteness at the top. And as that chain or hierarchy descends, the darker the people become and the less human they become. So what they did is they created this hierarchy that we call racist or racism, putting white people at the top and black people at the bottom, where whiteness was the center or the model of humanity, and blackness was at the bottom, and it was the model of what it means to be less than human. So if you're less than human, Brother Corbett, I can treat you less than human and still maintain my self-perception as a good, holy, moral, honest, decent person. And yet I can treat you inhumanely because I've created this social construction that says you are less than human. So when I pillage your land, when I rape your people, when I enslave your people, I don't see that as enslaving other human beings because you're not human. You're less than human. So they developed a theology to justify that type of behavior, to justify their domination. So when I talk about white theology, I'm talking about a theological construction that is supposed to be rooted in the Bible, but they remove the prophetic and the justice themes of the Bible because those prophetic and justice themes in the Bible contradict their theological construction that put the people that they don't like at the bottom and justify their domination. So that's what white theology is. Here's the problem, that when they brought our people from West Africa to the Americas to enslave them, the idea was that our forebears did not know God. And that couldn't be further from the truth. We knew God. We had God. We understood God. We had a relationship with God. But when they brought us to the America, they imposed upon our forebears this bastardized version of Christianity that was infused and rooted in white evangelicalism. So they hammered us with that, but some of our forebears fooled around and learned how to read for themselves. And they got a hold of that Bible and started reading it and said, this is inconsistent with what white people are doing to us and what they are saying to us about this book and about the God that's revealed in this book. And so you had people who understood the biblical text. And from that biblical text, they began to form their own theologies from their social construction. Whether you're looking at Harriet Tubman, who saw herself as a prophet from God based upon her understanding of that Bible. She saw herself being used by God to resist domination and to lead people to freedom. You got Frederick Douglass, who read that Bible and saw the contradiction that white clergy and white theology had infused in that Bible. You saw Nat Turner, who had the same Bible and saw himself as a prophet from God and saw his attack and resistance against the slavocracy as ordained and empowered by God. You got Denmark Vesey. Denmark Vesey was a conspirator, and he built this elaborate conspiracy against slavery in Virginia. And Denmark Vesey saw himself as being used by God. I think it was Denmark who had Samson as his hero. And so he allowed his hair to grow long, locks and all of that. And he literally saw himself moved and empowered by God to resist domination and to resist oppression. That's Black theology because it emerged from a Black context. Here is what happened, though. You had white clergy and white theologians to diffuse the biblical message of its prophetic edge and infuse it with a soft white evangelicalism that said the way to being Christian is to allow people to dominate you and wait for God himself to come in and deliver you. But you are not to take any initiative to push back against your dominators. Don't take any initiative to push back against your oppressors. And so many of us adopted that white theology and abandoned the black theology that emerged during the slavery period.
You so eloquently lay that out. Thank you for doing so. And it generates so many questions in addition to the questions that I have. Let me just throw out a couple of things. If you would, briefly, add into this melee's the Catholic Church.
The Catholic Church was just as guilty. And what happened, Catholicism flourished in the Caribbean nations and in the islands and that type of thing. And so when they took the West Africans to the Caribbeans for the purpose of slavery, the West Africans were so smart. They understood God. They had a relationship with God that they were able to take Catholicism and use its patron saints to mask their own religion. In other words, they embraced Catholicism, but beneath the veneer of Catholicism, they were still practicing the African indigenous religions. And so the Catholic Church is just as culpable in the perpetuation of slavery and oppression and domination as the white mainline evangelical churches. So yeah, they were all in it together.
All right. And another question is, you use the word bastardization, which is another word for perversion. Even a more common word, twisting something, right? And I think it's really important to bring that out, because what people do oftentimes, especially African-American people, is they say, well, that's the reason why I'm not a Christian. Because the Bible, is the root of the problem for the African-American person. It's the reason why we've been enslaved and so forth and so on, when the truth of the matter is, the Bible's the reason why our forebears fought against slavery. Could you please speak on the fact that it's not the Bible that's the problem, it's the way it was perverted that's the problem?
Yeah. It was the biblical hermeneutic that they used, that is the biblical interpretation that white evangelical used, was designed to support their theological premise that they were superior to everyone else.
And so that's not what the Bible says, but that's what they
read into the text to justify domination of people of color. They even used the Bible. Cain Hofelder, I don't know if you're familiar with Cain Hofelder. He wrote a book, Troubling Biblical Waters. And the reason Cain Hofelder wrote the book, Troubling Biblical Waters, one of the reasons was to argue with white scholars, because they were under the impression that the Bible had a negative view of Black people. So Cain Hofelder wrote Troubling Biblical Waters. One of his purpose was to argue and try to convince white scholars that no, the Bible doesn't have a negative opinion of Black people. In fact, the Bible has a positive opinion of Black people. So that was one of the reasons, and that's one of my critiques of Cain Hofelder's book. And I'm reading it, and he was one of my mentors, but I never had a chance to have this conversation with Cain Hope. Why are you trying to convince white folks of anything? Their minds are already made up. And I don't care how scholarly you are, Cain Hope, and you are a scholar to the nth degree. They're still not going to listen to you, because their minds have already been made up that the Bible has a negative view of Black people. And so they read that in, and so you get the curse of Ham myth that Ham was cursed, and the consequence of the curse was that he was turned black. You have the curse of Cain myth. Cain kills his brother, and God gets on his case, and God sends him out of the land of Eden, and he protests and says to God, that punishment is too stiff because people, when they see me, they're going to kill me. So God put a mark on Cain to show that you're special, and if anybody messes with you, I'm going to punish them. They argue that the mark was that he was turned black. They read that into it. But Brother Corbett, when you read the Bible, there is nowhere in the Bible where a curse resulted in making someone's skin black. But there are a couple of passages in the Bible where God cursed someone and their skin turned white. You don't have to guess. You can read about Miriam when she had issues with Moses.
That's right.
Mary Zipporah, God cursed her, and it said, and her skin turned white as snow and leprous.
Amen.
So you don't have to speculate, it's there. And then the next time someone's skin was turned white as a result of a curse is Gehazi. When he came, when Naaman came to Elisha, Elisha had leprosy, and he came to Elisha. Elisha told him to go dip 7 times, and he went and dipped 7 times, and his skin was made whole. And he goes back to Elisha, and he wants to pay Elisha. Elisha said, no, you don't have to pay me. Go on back to Syria and live your life. I don't want anything. Gehazi, one of the servants of Elisha, heard the conversation, and when Naaman was out of his sight, he runs up behind Naaman and says, well, my master changed his mind. He wants some gold, he wants some clothes, he wants some this, he wants that, and he takes all of this. Elisha finds out about it and said, why did you have to lie? And you lied on me. And he cursed him. And his curse was, you can read it in the Bible, was that he was turned white and leprous. Not only him, but the Bible said your entire generation will be white and leprous. These are conditions of a curse. That skin turned white. There are no passages in the Bible where skin turned black as a result of a curse. And that's just black and white. But when you have an agenda, and your agenda is to put whiteness as the center and make whiteness the universality of what humanity is, the universal symbol of humanity, you want to put that at the top. Then when you read the Bible, you read all of that foolishness into the text.
Okay. All right. Man. So very good. Let's go back, because that's a beautiful segue into a part of the preface that I got to read and let you comment on it, because I think what you just said, what you just explained, really highlights what we're getting ready to look at here. So the main reason so many of my African American clergy colleagues struggled to address the problem of social injustice sermonically was that many of them were too steeped in white, or you could say Western, evangelical theology. White evangelical theology provides no biblical hermeneutic, scriptural exegesis, nor theological urgency for prophetic preaching or a social justice ministry in the face of oppression and domination. Now, you sound a lot like James Cone there, or James Cone sounds a lot like you when he.
I sound like James, man. No, okay, no way, no way, no way.
Oh, I absolutely adore his take on the gospel. It speaks to me as if the Holy Spirit was speaking to him. His books, it's just amazing. But a couple of things. All right, a couple of things here. So if black clergy has been feeding on what you just explained, well, that's why they're unable to use the biblical text to address social injustices.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a pretty easy answer. The question that I have for you is why is black clergy so gullible? I mean, we know that white theologians justified slavery and Jim Crow and all the rest. Why then would we turn around and believe anything they say?
Mm-hmm. It's so ingrained in us, Brother Corbett. It's so ingrained, and it's hard to break free from that. You know, you have to be intentional to break free from it. You have to want to break free from it. And I think also who shares part of this responsibility is our HBCU seminaries. Many young people and now older people are entering seminary steeped in white evangelical theology. And when they get in seminary, that theological identity is never challenged by the academy. And we have to challenge that. We have to, first of all, acknowledge that we are teaching and ministering to in our institutions to a people who have been saturated in white evangelicalism. We have to know that. So when they enter into our seminaries, into our colleges, we have to teach in a way that challenge that theological perspective. Who was it? One scholar talked about a disorienting dilemma. That is, when you have a disorienting dilemma, that means everything you have been taught runs into a brick wall. And when our young people young and old people enter seminary, they need to have a disorienting dilemma that everything they have been taught about the Bible, about theology, about church, about God, about Christ, they need to run into a brick wall when they enter into seminary, run into a brick wall so that they can begin to rethink all of the stuff that have been poured into them over these years. And it doesn't need to be just one class. Their entire matriculation through seminary should be one disorienting dilemma after the next, so that everything you've been taught, you challenge it, you put it out on the table, you examine it, you pick it apart, and then you put it back together in a way that makes sense to you, in a way that's empowering to you, that's more consistent with the biblical text. That's not happening in our theological seminaries. And I know it's not happening because I developed tools to measure where a person is in terms of their theological, biblical, and racial identity. I've created the tools where I can assess it quantitatively and say beyond the shadow of a doubt, this is what it is. You know, I'm in the midst of an experiment right now. And I've developed 3 scales. Well, 2 scales. One scale was already developed by a brother named William Cross, and he developed it back in the 70s. And he calls it the Cross Racial Identity Scale. And what William Cross was doing was measuring the racial identity of African Americans, because William Cross saw that you had some black folk who were trying to distance themselves, disown their racial identity. You had some, when they looked at themselves, did not figure that race was a prominent feature in their self-understanding. They would say, I'm not a black Christian, I'm just a Christian. I'm not a black American, I'm just an American. I'm not a black man, I'm just a man. So they were distancing themselves from their racial identity. And then he said, on the other end, you had African Americans who leaned into their racial identity. I'm a black Christian. I'm a black psychologist. I'm a black attorney. I'm a black American. I'm a black man. I'm a black woman. So they leaned into their racial identity because their racial identity was a prominent part of who they were. And so he has a tool to measure that. And then I come along and I create the Williams Theological Identity Scale. And that's a way to measure where you are theologically. And I measure it on a continuum with John MacArthur and Jonathan Edwards on one end, and James Cone and Jeremiah Wright on the other end. And that tool is designed to measure, where are you theologically? Are you John MacArthur, Jonathan Edwards? Are you James Cone, Jeremiah Wright? Are you somewhere in between? I have the scale to measure that. And then I have the third scale. It's called the Biblical Identity Scale. That is, there are 40 items in that scale. There are 40 biblical passages. There are 4 possible interpretations of it. 2 of those interpretations are rooted in James Cone. 2 are rooted in John MacArthur. And you organize those interpretations on the basis of 1 meaning most like me, all the way down to 4 meaning most unlike me. So I have those 3 scales that are working, and I gave these 4 scales to a recent graduate of an HBCU seminary. When he was done with it, after having gone to seminary for 3 years, a black one, for 3 years, he leaned toward Jonathan Edwards, John MacArthur. He leaned toward, in his biblical interpretation, John MacArthur, Jonathan Edwards. He leaned away from his racial identity on the cross-racial identity scale. This is a young man who had been to an HBCU for 3 years, still came out self-hating and steeped in white evangelicalism. So it makes you wonder, what's going on in our HBCUs? What are they learning? What are they teaching? Is it a transformative experience? When you go through seminary, you need to come out transformed, changed, converted, empowered, to look at your reality from a different perspective than the one you were looking at it from when you first went in, because you had been immersed in white evangelicalism. Now, here's the problem, Doc. They come out and start pastoring churches and begin to reproduce white evangelicalism in black churches. It's a pattern that keeps going
Come on here.
over again. We have to do something. There has to be some intervention somewhere so that we can quit doing it. Now, here's the other problem. When you have been steeped in white evangelicalism as a pastor, everything in your ministry flows from that theological identity. If I'm Jonathan Edwards, John MacArthur, in my theological identity, when I'm pastoring my church, I'm preaching white theology. I'm teaching white theology. I have a white evangelical moral position. My ministry, my programs will be rooted in white evangelicalism. So what I'm essentially, what we become is a white church in blackface. And instead of ministering to black people, we are ministering to black people as if they are white people. Our needs are different. And so when that happens, then you have black people in black people in black churches who have been oriented by their black pastor into white evangelicalism. So what do? Because what we are doing is reinforcing the lie that whiteness is at the center. So if that's the case, why would I stay at a black church when I can go across town to the white church and get the genuine article? Because I don't have the genuine article at the black church because we are reproducing what white people are doing. Now, the black church can do a lot of things, but it cannot beat the white church being white.
Some try.
And some try. That's why that's one of the main reasons they are leaving our churches and going to white churches. But here's the problem. The white church is the most anti-black racist demographic in the country.
That's right.
Our people go to those churches and they experience theological, spiritual, social trauma from all of these micro expressions and microaggressions by white Christians. They go over there and leave traumatized. They're looking for something and they go there and they have traumatic experiences. So when we as a black church is reproducing white evangelicalism in the black church, we are forcing our people to go to white churches where they are going to experience trauma. No, so something has to happen, Brother Corbett, to reverse this trend. Something has to happen.
Okay, let me jump in. That so much here, so much. I want to go back to something you said about this disorienting. How did you say it?
Disorienting dilemma.
The disorienting dilemma. So yeah. I've been having that theologically since I was a teenager.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. And I shared with you that it was so bad when I was 10, 11, 12. I mean, I guess the Lord was just dealing with me that I eventually just left the church and I became a Muslim. I embraced Islam. And I came back to the church. And when I came back, my eyes were open a whole lot more, such that I began to read the Bible for myself and could understand it without the lens that were being imposed on me as a child. And I saw, wow, I never had to leave the Christian faith, never had to leave the church, because the Bible is the most pro-social justice book ever written.
All you have to do is read it.
All you have to do is read it and take those lenses off. Now, so much so, let me share this with you. For 1 year, I went to Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary in Wake Forest, North Carolina. Mm-hmm. I didn't finish because I couldn't take it. Okay? More of this disorienting dilemma. I had a serious argument with the professor over St. Augustine. I asked the professor in the middle of the class, I told my brother colleagues, told them, I said, I'm going for broke today. Okay, I'm just going to go for broke today. All right. So I said, I raised my hand, Dr. So-and-so, white professor. I said, wasn't St. Augustine an African? And he said, and he got red face. He said, no. I said, well, would you concede that he was a man of color? No. And so it was me and him from that point on, respectfully. but me and him from that point on. And we basically argued from class all the way to the chancellor's office over that point. Because as you said, there should be that disorienting dilemma that should occur quite a bit when you hear what you know. You may not have the education that you have in this area, but you should know this is not consistent with the Bible, what you're telling me here. Okay?
That professor should have had a disorienting dilemma, because he came up against the fact that St. Augustus, along with the other early church fathers before Christianity was ever recognized and accepted in Europe, they were doing the doggone thing in North Africa. St. Augustus and several of the other early church fathers.
That's right.
Thomas C. Olden has a book.
I have it.
He's a white scholar. You got Thomas C. Olden?
I read this great book.
Oh my goodness. This white dude is on point. And he's giving it to us, and he's telling us that the origin of Christianity is North Africa.
Exactly.
You know?
I will put that description. I will put where you can get that book, folks, in the description of this video.
You have to read Thomas C. Olden, and many of his colleagues were upset with him, but he didn't care. He kept fudging, moving forward, because he said, this is it. If you've not read, Thomas C. Olden's book, where he deals with Mark, I can't think of the name of Thomas Olden's book. What's the name of it?
African Memory.
The African Memory of Mark.
Wow.
Man, when he talks, Doc, you have to get that book. He talks about Mark from the perspective of how they
ordering it now
in Africa. You have to have that book. And he talks about the origin of Mark. And Mark was from Libya. He's an African. He's a black man. And he talks about his association with Peter. And of course, we know that the gospel according to Mark is Peter's recollections of the ministry of Jesus, as it was written by Mark, who was a young scholar. His mother moved from Libya because of all of the stuff that was going on in Libya at that time, relocated to Jerusalem. She was a woman of means, and she bought this house in Jerusalem. And we know it was in Jerusalem because when Peter got out of prison, he was held in prison in Jerusalem, and he went, the Bible says, to the home of the mother of John Mark in Jerusalem. Her name was Mary, the mother of John Mark, and that's where they stayed. And he also makes the case that that house in Jerusalem was the same house where Jesus had the Last Supper, where the people assembled on the day of Pentecost. So what he concludes was that the home that hosted the Last Supper was the home of a black woman.
Wow.
The church on the day of Pentecost started in the home of a black woman.
Wow.
So the Christian roots are black, however you look at it. So when you talk about a disorienting dilemma, it's those types of arguments and documentations and facts that we run into, and we have to deal with it. You just can't shove it off. You just can't blow it. You have to deal with this stuff.
And I love to tell people as well that the Ethiopian eunuch received the gospel in chapter 8 of the book of Acts, 2 chapters before Cornelius, the Italian. So we could use that as a basis for the fact that a black man received the gospel before Europeans did. Mm-hmm. All right. Now, we are an hour into this, and I could keep you here and talk with you even more. There's a lot more that needs to be said. We can't say it at one time. Folks need to go get your books and the books that were referenced and authors in this discussion: Thomas Ogden, James Cone, of course, Dr. Williams, and go to his website. There are other tools there to help us begin the process of interrupting this dependency of black churches on white theology. It's having, as I said in the beginning, a very deleterious impact on our community. We should be leading the way in the fight for social justice, the church, the black church. And instead, where are we? Now, we have led the way, civil rights movement. We led the way in slavery. But where are we now? We're dealing with an administration that's rolling back civil rights every day, voting rights every day, fair housing rights every day. All sorts of black rights are being rolled back every day. And there is dead silence, crickets, from most black clergy.
Yeah.
And that is root. That the reason for that, in my opinion, and Dr. Williams just explained that I'm right about this, it is the influence of white theology. It is the influence of white theology. It is black churches having white faces, or white faces with black churches. Dr. Jeremiah Wright's phraseology. So let's close with this. I didn't get to most of my questions here, but let's close with this. You kind of touched on it a few minutes ago. How do we correct this?
Well, with education, and I think we are in the midst of a disorienting dilemma as a community. We're in the midst of it. We're up against it. We're seeing it in real time.
Let me ask you a question, Dr. Williams. Let me ask you a quick question. So I think the work that you're doing, the scales that you use and so forth, and having identified that HBCUs are producing seminarians with this white evangelical theology, that seems to be the root of the issue here, because those graduates then go to the pulpits and so on. Now, let me just ask you this question. So is it difficult for these HBCUs to change their curriculum, to use books by men like yourself and others, or does that run headlong into accreditation and issues like that?
No. Well, I've created it over the last 2.5 years, myself, along with other scholar practitioners. We've created the Bible is Black History Online Academy. There are 8 courses. Each course has 9 sessions. It's a 9-month program, and it deals with biblical Black presence. It deals with hermeneutics. We look at the history, the origin of the Black church in the United States, and all of the stuff that we talked about in this discussion. That stuff is in that curriculum. It's an online academy. And I've been trying to shop this out to HBCUs, not to incorporate it in their normal curriculum, but to have it available for the student body, that if they wanted it. In fact, there is one HBCU that has a religion department, and they have an associate's, bachelor's, master's, and a PhD in their school of religion. And I reached out to that school of religion and has at least on an associate level. Would you take a look at this material? Would you take a look at it? And let's have a conversation and make this available. There was another prominent HBCU that I had a conversation with the dean of that school. And he basically told me that since I didn't have the PhD and only had the DMe and the doctorate of ministry, that my stuff doesn't qualify, and my response to him was, so by that standard, Reinhold Niebuhr wouldn't be able to teach at your school because he didn't have a PhD. By that standard, James Baldwin couldn't teach at your school. James Baldwin never went to college, brother. Richard Wright couldn't teach at your school. Richard Wright may have completed the 9th grade, And so I said,
even Jesus couldn't teach that.
He couldn't teach that because he didn't have the credential. So I'm saying to him, here's the point that I'm making, that in the academy, it is so much elitism that we are the elite. And if knowledge is not generated from our ivory towers in the academy, then it's illegitimate. Not knowing that I'm a PhD candidate as we speak. I have a doctorate of ministry, master of divinity, a master's of arts in organizational development, a PhD candidate in that same vein. So if you're talking about credentials, I have it. It's just that I don't even want to look at it. If it didn't come from Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, I don't want to look at it. It's that elitism that's choking the life out of our institutions.
So elitism, not accreditation.
No, it got nothing to do with accreditation.
What the
you
reputation
can be with this? Yeah.
So the reputation of the school.
The what now?
Is it the reputation? I'm trying to figure out why they would hold on so strongly to the theology of these European theologians and these folks, instead of incorporating on some level the work that you're doing and Cone and all the rest of them, so that we can address the root of this issue. This is really serious.
It is. And it could be their donor base, that I'm getting big dollars from this big corporation. Mm-hmm. And if I have this as a part of our curriculum, that might jeopardize the money that we get from our donors. That's the only thing I can think of. That's the only thing I can think of. I don't know. And the other piece is that if you connect with an HBCU, with the seminary, then that legitimizes the work that I'm doing. And a lot of people want to keep it delegitimized, that it has no merit, that it has no salience, that, so I just don't understand it. And we keep reproducing the same thing over and over, and then wonder why our churches are not as strong as they could be, and wonder why young people are saying, like, when you were a young man, I'm not leaving God. I love God. But the way y'all doing Christianity excludes me from the God story. So I'm going to go to the Nation of Islam, because I know if I go to the Nation of Islam, I'm going to be included in the God story. And we have other younger people who are leaving, going to the traditional African religions that our forebears practice, because they know I'm a part of the God story. And then you have people leaving, going to the Black Hebrew Israelites, because they know they're going to see themselves in the God story. But then you come to the Black church.
See, that's heartbreaking.
You don't see yourself.
That's the heartbreaking part of the whole thing. When I'm out sharing Christ and his kingdom with young Black men, I represent many of them in my practice. Oftentimes they don't want to hear it because they don't identify with the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
They went through exactly what I went through, what you went through. You talk about it in your book. I was going to read it. And so that's the problem that it's having. It is causing a generation of African American people to shun the church and ultimately, unfortunately, lose their souls, and that and commit a whole lot of infractions on their way, right? And end up across the desk from me. So I really appreciate this.
But before we go, Brother Corbett,
Yes.
Can you please say something about critical race theory? Because I heard that was taught in law school, and that type of thing. Is that so?
That's true. Critical race theory. I'm getting ready to release a video today, actually.
Okay.
That will be entitled "Critical Race Theory versus Project 2025." And the reason so let me go back. Critical race theory started with lawyers, constitutional law professors, attorneys back in the 70s. And it arose because those lawyers and professors, namely Dr. Derek Bell or Professor Derek Bell, Kimberly Crenshaw, another person, Richard Delgado, these folks asked the question: if we got the Civil Rights Act passed, if we got the Voting Rights Act passed, if we got the Fair Housing Act passed, if we got the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments, if we got the Section 1981 Civil Rights Law, Section 1983, which was originally the Ku Klux Klan Act, if we got all of that, why are Black people still suffering? Why are we still experiencing much? Now, there's been a lot of progress. It's not to negate the progress. The progress has been awesome. But there's still these gaps, these disparities. And it's in those gaps that our communities are suffering. And so critical race theory basically deconstructs the intersection of law, of race, of racism, of economics. It goes broader than just the civil rights and just asks, how are all of these disciplines, these fields, interplaying and bringing about the continued struggle of the African American community? And very, very useful too. Many books have been written on critical race theory, many journals, many articles on critical race theory, and it was making inroads. It was asking the right questions and offering solutions. And because it was being so successful and effective at asking and raising these questions, white conservatives said, we got to get rid of that. And that's what they did. They started attacking critical race theory in the first Trump administration. They made it sound like it was just the worst thing ever because it was getting to the very root of systemic racism. And it's been successful. I mean, you have a lot of Black people now who are on that bandwagon. Critical race theory is bad. Critical race theory. And all you got to do is ask them, what is it?
Right.
And they obviously don't know. And so I'm trying to revive it. I'm trying to use whatever platform I have to revive it because it is an essential tool to fighting Project 2025. And that's the reason why they got rid of it, because they knew back in Trump's first administration what the goal was. The goal was to take us back. The goal was to roll back many of those gains. And critical race theory was in the way of that agenda. And so it has fallen by, on the junk pile. I'm trying to say, hold on. We need to revive it. We need to revive critical race theory. Here's what it means. Let me simplify it. We needed to fight what we're dealing with in Project 2025. We got 3 more years of this, at least. So yeah, that's a sort of a quick synopsis of critical race theory. It did start in law school, and conservatives were completely lying when they said that the critical race theory was being taught in high school and middle school and all of that. That total lies.
Yeah. Okay. So they turned it into the boogeyman.
Absolutely. They made it toxic, and they're masters at that. They're geniuses.
Oh my God. I mean, they have been developing this genius for centuries, man. They even taught that people who were advocates for the abolition of slavery demonized them, said that they hated America and that they were troublemakers and that type of thing. And there were some black people who believed them. There were some black people who fought with the Confederate Army against the Union Army.
And that's a whole nother discussion right there. The fact that we have those kinds of blacks who side with white supremacy like that, and their impact today is even worse given social media.
Yeah, and they're not going anywhere. We've always had this kind. I mean, you had people, like I talked about Denmark Vesey and his conspiracy. Black people turned against him and went and told white folks about the plan, and he got arrested. He got killed. There were black people who were trying to catch Harriet Tubman, trying to stop her from doing what she was doing. You had some of the biggest black clergy persons in the country who were opposing Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in the civil rights movement. So you're going to always have those. That's why, Candace Owens and what is his name, Stephen A. Smith and the judge, whatever his name is, the Supreme Court Justice
Clarence Thomas.
They don't surprise me. We've always had that element in our community. They come and they go.
Clarence Thomas, Justice Thomas, has to be at the top of that list today, just given his position. He's a very powerful person, extremely powerful. And he's currently, his latest goal, objective, is to gut the remaining section, important section of the Voting Rights Act, which is Section 2, which we use to fight racial gerrymandering. And he's using, believe it or not, he's using the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment to gut a key section of the Voting Rights Act, which both laws were passed for the benefit of black people. So we have a black man using the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, which was added for us, and using that to attack, to undermine the last remaining section with teeth of the Voting Rights Act.
And to think of it, man, this is the guy who succeeded Thurgood Marshall.
But fortunately, God always has a ram in the bush. And when Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson was put on that court, I'd been praying. You know, I told my wife, I said, what we need on that court is a black woman. We need a sister on that court who's not afraid to speak, who will stand up, who is from us, and who could counterbalance basically Thomas. And that's exactly what she's doing. The problem we have on the court right now, Dr. Williams, is when Trump won in 2016, this may be his lasting legacy in terms of anti-blackness. He was able to put 3 far-right Supreme Court justices on SCOTUS. Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett. Relatively young people, they will be on the court for decades, undermining.
But here's my problem with Democrats. You know, here's my problem. Why not expand the court and put more people on it to balance it? Why are you afraid to do that? You know, and I know the answer is, well, another conservative can get on it and expand it. Well, okay, let's play the expansion game for as long as you want, you know, or there's nothing outside the rules that says that if you have a Democratic president and a Democratic House and Senate, you can't rewrite the rules of the Supreme Court. You know, I mean, you can reconfigure the Supreme. There's several things you can do with the Supreme Court if you have the will of the executive office and the Congress. There are a lot of things you can do. Because right now it's out of hand.
No,
it's way out of hand.
You're absolutely right. If another Democrat takes office, well, I won't be pessimistic. I don't mean to say if another, but when another Democrat takes office, and as you said, has that at least 60 Senate majority of Democrats and controls the House, and if his first item or her first item of business is not reconfiguring the court, I don't know what to say.
Yeah,
because we see the court rubber stamping everything that Trump does for the most part, and we can't take another decade or so of this as African Americans. We literally could be back in Jim Crow. It's that bad. I'm very, very concerned about our community and the losses that we are suffering. You know, I'm in the courtroom almost daily, and the tools that we use to fight racism are literally the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, Fair Housing Act. We use Section 1981 federal law, Section 1983, very specific laws, and they've already been weakened over the years. They never stopped. Just because we got those things passed, they never stopped trying to weaken them. And what we're seeing now is sort of a white backlash 2.0, a Jim Crow attempt 2.0, and it makes it extremely difficult to fight this stuff in court. You get rid of Section 2, for example, then states are able to racial gerrymander. They're able to draw voting maps like they did years ago, decades ago, and basically get rid of black representatives. That's what's about to happen here in Texas. And the only way to fight, the best way to fight that is, again, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. They already got rid of Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, which was really important. It required certain states that were notorious for disenfranchising us. It required them to get pre-approval from the Justice Department before they changed their voting laws. Well, they don't have to do that anymore.
What's my young sister's name from Texas? She's from Houston.
Jasmine Crockett.
Jasmine, is her seat in jeopardy?
Okay, that's a great question, because the new map actually does impose some on her district. What this new map does is, it's called cracking and packing what they do when they do racial gerrymandering. There is a black district, majority district. It's actually Latino majority, I think, but the representative is a black man. His name is Mark Vesey. And his district butts up to Jasmine's district. So this new map takes the Hispanic majority part of Mark Vesey's district and butts up his district with Jasmine Crockett's district. So it doesn't actually take it, but it dilutes it. It cracks it. So they cracked his district and then packed it with Jasmine Crockett.
So she's going to have to be more strategic in reaching out to the Latino vote.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So the result of that is, since Mark Vesey, since his district doesn't have that majority Hispanic, doesn't have that part of the district anymore, and he had good favor with them. They voted for him every time. Now the white majority, now the whites have more of a majority in his district. So a white person, in fact, has already announced that they're going to be running for that district, his district. And there's a good chance, at least a decent chance, of that person being able to win without that majority Hispanic side of his district. Now, I think Jasmine I think she'll be okay. I think she'll be okay because her district is so solidly African American. In fact, I live in her district. Her district spans quite a bit. She's my representative. So I think she'll be okay. It's Mark Vesey who could actually be in trouble. And her district is not as big as it was because it was packed with Mark Vesey. So they weakened both of them, actually.
Wow.
And the way to fight that again is Section 2. That is before the court right now, and we're waiting for an opinion on that. And Thomas is leading the way to convince his colleagues to gut it.
He's a victim of white supremacy. He's a victim, man. And I feel sorry for these people like that. I pray for them daily because they are casualties of white supremacy. They're destroyed, yes. Man. White supremacy destroyed that man. So, yeah.
Internalized racism.
Huh?
Internalized racism.
Oh, yeah, man. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Man,
well,
this was
brother,
wonderful.
Man, I enjoyed the conversation, man.
This was wonderful. This was just wonderful. I so appreciate this. I can't wait to get this up so that folks can listen to this. This was just beautiful. I want to promote the work that you're doing. I want folks to, take those scales, race, Bible, theology.
I'm going to send it to you because I'm interested in seeing where you are.
I am too. But if there's no way it's going to come back, John MacArthur and Jonathan, there's no way. All right, man, I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much. And we'll be in touch.
Thank you, man. Have a good one, man.
You too. Bye-bye.
Be blessed.